Hello, hello, hello. It is UFC review time. This time, UFC Vegas 91 from the Apex. Actually turned out to be a pretty good card. I would say this card over-delivered based on what it was on paper. Looking down the list here, the main event was pretty good. Gushkov versus Spawn was fun. Silva versus Lipski was a letdown. And I am still saying Lipski, even though she's going by Ariana De Silva. Not sure. Did she get married or is that just an extended name? I don't know. I think she got married. I could be wrong. I know, but she's fighting someone named Silva, so I'm going with Lipski for the purposes of this review. Denise was versus Austin Lane was what it was supposed to be. David Onama versus Jonathan Pierce was a good time. Earl Smetic got a cool knockout against Tim Means. Victor Henry beat Ronnie Yaya in an entertaining fight. Austin Hubbard versus Mikhail Figlak was pretty fine. Dontel Mays, Kai Machado, it was what it was. It's a heavyweight fight. What are you going to do? Ketlin Souza versus Marnik Man was the low light of the card. Chris Badila versus James Yontop was scathing, but fun. And then you have Petrovich versus Leon, which was fine. And then Mahashate versus Gabriel Benitez, which was pretty good. It was a card where my picks didn't do supremely well. A lot of really, really close decisions here. Not robberies. I want to make that clear. But like I did score Benitez versus Mahashate for Benitez, but scoring it for Mahashate, perfectly fine. Scoring Hubbard versus Figlak, I think I gave it to Figlak. Hang on. Let me check the notes real quick. Did I score this for Figlak? I think I did. I scored rounds 1 and 3 for Figlak, round 2 for Hubbard, but very, very close rounds again. So a decision that totally makes sense. Onama versus Pierce was really close. I scored it for Onama. I was right. I scored Machado versus Mays for Machado. That wound up being wrong. I still don't really agree with that. We'll look at the UFC stats on that later because I'm kind of interested. And then I also scored Lipski versus Silva for Lipski, but I totally do get Silva winning. It's the classic top control argument. So picks could have been really good, but they were not. Let's start at the top and work our way down. I guess I should, quickly say what's going on in social media MMA-wise right now. Michael Chandler and his adopting of black kids and whether he should, whether he's handling it appropriately. Is John Jones gay? I have no interest in either of those. And then I guess Charlie Arnold doing ring announcing for the UFC on this card. I guess I'll give an opinion on that. We didn't get a lot of it, and at the end of the day, I thought she was fine. There are things that could be better. I thought her delivery was a little stilted, a little wooden, but hey, whatever. If you want to let Charlie Arnold do ring announcing, I'm fine with it. I have no issue. Moving on. So we start with Alex Perez versus Matthias Nicolau, which, was the end of the night, the main event. It's an interesting fight because Perez looked better than he's ever looked. I don't just mean that because he beat Matthias Nicolau and that's his best win of all time and whatever, but I just mean like there were things that were clicking that have historically not clicked for him before. His comfort as a striker, his variety, his creativity. He had a lot more different ways of entering the pocket than he usually does. Everything clicked. Everything. Like this is the Alex Perez that I think people were waiting for when he, beat Husier Formiga and never really showed up. And that was pretty damn cool. I still thought the first round was very, very close. But at the second round, it didn't end up mattering because Perez just put him away. Nice counter by Perez. And then suddenly Nicolau was on the ground and getting put away. An excellent performance from Alex Perez. Is his success because Alex Perez has really turned a corner? I think partially, for sure. But how much of it was just like Nicolau being, I don't want to say done or washed or anything, but like he is a guy who gives you a lot of space and time to throw what you want. He is the type of guy that you're going to look more creative and comfortable entering the pocket than anyone else. So functions of the matchup versus actual progression, I'm not sure where it is. I've got Perez against KKF next. I've got Nicolau against Bruno Silva because frankly, I think if I think if Alex Perez can look like this good against you, I think Bruno Silva can, because I think he's been a very, very overlooked flyweight who actually has a lot of creativity, power, and physical ability. So I think it would be a really, really fun matchup. Ryan Spawn versus Bogdan Gushkov was a round of grappling, which Spawn won, and then he got knocked out. There's not much else to say. I don't think that this really like makes me feel any better about like Gushkov in general. It's just dude does hit really, really, really hard. There's not a lot of technical game that backs that up. I think there are some grappling holes, but this is also 205. How much is that going to actually get capitalized on? I don't know. But he did get the win over here over Ryan Spawn. He also had the win over, damn it, who did he knock out? I'm legitimately blanking as to who it was now that he... Zach Pauga. Anyways, he put away Zach Pauga. Now he's put away Ryan Spawn. He's got a little bit of a roll going, and it's more than I ever expected. So, as for his next opponent, I've got Anthony Smith. We might as well do the Tekken mirror match because Dom Cruz... was it Dom Cruz or Cormier? Damn it. Somebody earlier in the night had a whole thing about like mirror match Tekken stuff. It was in the Silva Lipski fight. I forget who now. It'll probably be in my notes. Anyways, for Ryan Spawn, I don't really care because he's a chronic underachiever. Like, he's on a 3-fight losing skid that realistically, you look at it on paper, I'm not really sure if he should have lost any of them. Okay, no. He should have lost to Krylov. Pardon me. But like Anthony Smith, he's taller than, and Anthony Smith is like really bad against people who have range on him. And then he loses to Bogdan Gushkov here, and it's just like, what are we doing? Like, and his wins are over Dominic Reyes, guy I can't trust. Ion Kudalaba, guy I can't trust. Misha Serkinov, guy I can't trust. Like, Sam Alvey, guy shouldn't have been in the UFC like at that point. Period. Yeah, I don't know what to do with him. I penciled OSP in here because I guess OSP needs a fight, but I don't really care. I don't really know nor care what you can do with him. Ariane Lipski versus Karine Silva. This was a lot duller than I expected because Silva is usually kind of chaotic and kind of dynamic. That wasn't really the case here. She just kind of took down Lipski and held her down. Now, I still scored the first of the third round for Lipski. I think the third round did end up getting universally scored for Lipski. So I think that's not a hot take. Yeah, I'm correct on that. No, Adelaide Bird scored all 3 rounds for Karine Silva. Ugh. That just convinces me that I'm right. But the first round was given universally to it. My thoughts essentially boiled down to as follows. In the first round, both ladies got a takedown. Basically, it was not a takedown, but Lipski got a reversal. But anyways, both got about 1 minute and change in top control. Officially 158 for Silva, 143 for Lipski. Lipski did more with it. She landed more strikes. Was it super impressive? No. She also got stuck in a dead orchard at one point. But she landed more. She won the stand-up phase of the fight. She has the significant strikes, the total strikes edge, and she was controlled for an extra 15 seconds. I thought she won that round. I don't have a problem with it going to Silva. I'm not complaining. I'm not screaming robbery. But I do realistically think Lipski probably won that round. We go into the second round. This was Silva's round. This was the round that she was able to outland Lipski. She had 3 minutes and 39 seconds of top control, won the grappling exchanges, etc. I have no problem with that round going to her. And then the third round was a lot of stand-up, although still 2 minutes on the ground, 2 for 3 on takedowns. Lipski won the stand-up again, and I think, again, that was the one that, she outlanded her 3-1 per UFC stats, 2-1 in significant strikes. So, yeah, I think Lipski won, but I have no actual issue with Silva winning. I guess my only real issue with Silva is this is a step forward for her in terms of winning fights, but it's a very, very boring step forward. I'm not sure I like it. I'm normally very, very, very okay with fighters like, winning fights. Do what you gotta do. I was the guy who didn't really hate John Fitch fights, for example, back in the day. It's like, this is John Fitch, this is what he has to do to win. We deal with that. It just feels like there's a more exciting but fight winning and fight finishing like fighter in Karine Silva that could be unleashed. And maybe we're in the process of getting there, but right now it's a little bit dull. But anyways, next opponents I've got Karine Silva versus Lauren Murphy, because I do want to see what happens when she faces somebody she really shouldn't be able to take down. And if she can take down Murphy, then like we just have to accept that she is actually like kind of a top end takedown artist. But Murphy does tend to be a good wrestle boxer. So it would be a test. Ironically, probably a lower rated test than this one. And probably a lower rated test than the fight I'm giving Lipsky, which is Miranda Maverick, because I just think that would be really, really fun. I'm the reason I'm not going with like Maverick versus Silva is I have no interest. This version of Silva just will get on top and kind of, control Maverick for like 20 minutes or not 20 minutes, but like 10 minutes of the fight. There you go. So it's just not very interesting. Denise got taken down in explosive fashion by Austin Lane, survived, and then knocked him out in the second round. And that was basically it. Again, Lane is, I even said it here, is like, Lane is just crashing into the clinch and getting hit. I'm waiting for a KO here. That was my notes. And then, he gets stunned, and left hook ends the night. It's part of why I don't really like Austin Lane in the UFC is that like he's not a proving ground for anybody, because he is exceptionally athletic for a heavyweight. It's just he's a glass cannon. So I don't really have anything for him. I'm sure we will get something. He is a former NFL player. They seem to think that on its own will market somebody. And I like kind of like, I get the idea of bringing in former NFL players and like hoping like, hey, they're really, really athletic, they'll do something. It's like, there's no guarantee that they will. And when it comes to Austin Lane, he's 36 years old, and I just don't think he will. For Denise, I have like Junior Tafa, but really it's just anyone who can bang. And who's going to bang with him would be fun. Jonathan Pierce versus David Onama. This was a very competitive fight. I gave the third round to Onama, the second round to Pierce, and the first round I saw as a toss-up. Onama got the first round on all three cards and took the fight win. That is probably where I would have gone with it, to be honest. We're looking at the stats here just for a quick note. Onama landed the better strikes on the feet throughout the entire round, or the entire fight, basically, all 15 minutes. But it was basically very, very close to the first round, and then there was a takedown for Pierce for 50 seconds of top control, got reversed by Onama, but like the constant takedown pressure kept Onama from really, really unloading. But at the end of the day, he was able to explode and reverse, and it's just kind of weird. I have in my notes here with Onama, he's spent the entire time like exploding out of it, but like having no idea of how to actually avoid being put into a position where he would have to explode out of Pierce's grappling. And then in the third round, he just starts shrugging takedowns off, using good footwork to avoid being in a spot where JSP can clinch with him and get the takedown easily. And it's just so frustrating that he doesn't start doing that until he's like tired. It's so frustrating because like realize that Onama is exhausted in the third round, and it is the round that he just tees off on him mercilessly, shuts down the takedowns, and does his thing. So frustrating. Anyways, good win for Onama. I've got Damon Jackson against him next because it is a very, very similar matchup, and I want to see him do better. And then JSP versus Pat Sabatini, because there's no real reason that Onama should be losing these fights. Although he did miss weight again, so problems. We rolled down to Tim Means versus Uros Medic, and this was kind of sad because it's Tim Means basically just pressuring for a body lock and trying to get a takedown and like taking all the striking aspects out of his game and then getting knocked out with an uppercut. There's not much else to say. It's not that I think Tim Means can't fight. It's just I don't think Tim Means. It's not that Tim Means can't wrestle. To be clear, like emphasizing wrestling is probably a good idea for him, but like it's emphasized to the exclusion of like anything else. I just don't think it'll really work. So it's I don't know. It's time for the retirement fight. The Zach Cummings Ed Herman moment probably is here for him. We'll probably not get it, but we'll see. I've got Medich versus Preston Parsons just because they both beat Matthew Semmelsberger. That's literally as far as my logic goes on that. Nothing about this fight inspires me to think that Medich is actually like, turning a corner and becoming better or whatever. I just think that he was a guy that came up being very big and now he's not very big. And I think that is going to be a limiting factor for him because I just don't think that there's a lot there. Like he does hit hard, but like that's kind of it. Victor Henry versus Ronnie Yaya was pretty competitive for the first round. Yaya was able to get some takedowns in the first round, was able to work his game and do some things. But then, officially they gave him an 0 for 10 on takedowns, but he managed to get a little bit of like clinch control, some like grappling-esque situations and like keep Henry from really opening up. And then in the second, third round, Henry just started actually opening up and like just clonking him repetitively. Bang, 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 bang. Knocked him out in the third round. It is on one hand a really good performance from Henry because it's a cool knockout and whatever, and it's a W. But at the other time, I also was a little bit frustrated that there were moments where like a lot of the things that he normally does to keep the range just didn't seem to be clicking. And I don't know what to make of that because I don't think that it was really anything Yaya was specifically doing. I just think that he wasn't handling the pressure well. And that could be a problem going forward. Anyways, he did get the W. I've got him booked against Adrian Yanez. I know Yanez is booked against Vinicius Salvador, but here is the disrespect I'm giving Salvador. I don't think he's going to win. I'm not even putting like the winner of that fight. I'm just assuming Yanez wins. So there you go. And Yaya versus Damon Blackshear would be super fun. Austin Hubbard and Miguel Figlak had one of those fights, and we're going to talk about this like dynamic later on with Benitez versus Mahashate as well, where really, and there was no winner. It was just like endless exchanges going back and forth, and like both of them being able to hit each other, being able to land their own stuff, and it was whatever you saw more comfortably being the defining factor of what happened. It was like incredibly subjective. I gave 1 and 3 to Figlak. That was my winning card for him. Let's see here. What were the cards in that? Judge Mike Bell gave the first 2 rounds to Hubbard. Judge Eric Cologne and Brian Miner the same. Okay, so it's universal card. Yeah, no, like I said, I have no problem with it, but like the media scores all scored it for Figlak. It's one of those weird ones where like I don't like it's just incredibly subjective. Like the strike gaps here were 0, +7 to Hubbard, and then +8 to Figlak, and overall +1 to Figlak. So there's not much there. Hubbard did technically have like 3 takedowns, but like they didn't go anywhere. They went nowhere. It's a fun fight, but it's one that I don't think gives me any real thoughts or hopes for either guy going forward. Like their limitations I think are still there. My pick in this fight was Figlak just off of the idea that I really didn't think Hubbard is not UFC caliber, but like he is prelim caliber. And he's a little bit too far along to change that. And I think, unfortunately, the deal here is, even though I think Figlak won, he's kind of in that same boat as well. That there just isn't enough there. Now, he's 27 years old. He could still learn. He could still get better. But I don't know. Dontel Mays versus Kyle Machado. Next fights. Hubbard versus Evan Elder. And Figlak versus a Dana White Contender Series guy. Not because he's not good enough to win against someone established, but because I think he needs a win. He has now lost 2 in a row to Faris Ziam and Austin Hubbard. He really does need that dub. And that feels like a good use of getting like, really some of the guys we're signing off Contender Series are quite bad. And that would be a good way of using them. We'll be talking about that later with Marnik Mann. Dontel Mays versus Kyle Machado was not very good, but I remember watching and thinking Machado definitely won. He outlanded Mays in the third round quite heavily. Second round was very, very, very close. I guess that's the swing round. Mays did win the first round. He got the knockdown there, which was the biggest moment of the fight. So I guess that probably is what, weighed heavily. What were the scores for that one? Rounds 1 and 2 to Mays across the board. Yeah, it's defensible. It's defensible. This was another fight where like I was going with like, I'm very certain Mays is a good enough athlete to compete at heavyweight and very, very durable, but that there was just not enough to his game. It was too janky and too unstructured, not deep enough that he would always be a prelim guy. And I think I went with Machado on the idea of maybe he could be something more. And I don't think that's the case. And I think that's kind of reflected by my next fights for them, because I got Mays versus Gaziv in a fight that maybe springboards Gaziv back to something, and or just exposes him for what he is, which is not very good. And for Machado, I've got Jamal Pogues, who's kind of in the very much same boat as him. They also both lost to Mick Parkin, so continuing my my deal with that. Ketlin Souza versus Marnik Mann. So it's a one-sided fight. If Ketlin Souza was better, she would have finished Marnik Mann, who has nothing to her game. And I said I was going to talk about Marnik Mann and the quality off Contender Series. This woman lost twice on Contender Series. She's a 5 foot tall strawweight, so she's short. I was talking with someone on Twitter about this, and one person was like, I don't want to say defending, because I think the idea was like just trying to explain the short notice nature of things and how it's going to lead to like not great fighters coming in. But here's the thing. Short notice nature fights should be like Chris Petilla, who we're going to talk about in a bit, where you don't believe he's UFC caliber, but there is something he can do. There is something there. Marnik Mann has been on Contender Series against Josephine Knudsen and Bruna Brazil, and was clearly outmatched in both of those fights. Like, insanely so. Got stopped by Bruna Brazil, and if I recall correctly, Knudsen was like, can I get cards? I think they were like 10-8s, like multiple 10-8 rounds in that fight. Does MMA Decisions do it by fighter? They do. Hang on. I might have. Yeah. Mike Bell scored all rounds 10-8s on that Contender Series fight. And Sal D'Amato gave the second and the third round 10-8s on that card. Brian Miner went 10-9s all the way around. It was kind of crapped on for it. But that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that she is not good. And Ketlin Souza is not particularly good either, but like she's at least functional enough and well-rounded enough to possibly win fights in the UFC and like be someone to prove something against. There was literally nothing here. If I read the stats here, she got doubled up in all 3 rounds and tripled up significant strikes in the third round. She did get a takedown, or 2 takedowns, pardon me, 2 for 5. No. Like, Mann is not a terrible clinch wrestler. She's reasonably strong. She's reasonably durable. But that's it. There's nothing there. And the advice coming from her corner, truly terrible. I just felt bad for Marnik Mann in this fight, because she's getting put in a position to just lose and not succeed. She's not being given the tools to succeed, and she's not getting paid nearly enough to justify that. Like, that's it. She's just getting beat up, and she chooses to do it. I'm whatever, but like, don't sign fighters like this, particularly not in divisions that don't need them. Like, I could see this at bantamweight, women's bantamweight, where you're trying to build a division and you don't have a lot, and you're making do with low level stuff and trying to like sift through it to find like little nuggets of gold. You don't need to do that at strawweight. I don't know. I was just annoyed at this fight. Souza got against Sam Hughes, and Marnik Mann gets a hearty go away. James Lontrop got rear naked choked by Chris Padilla. He got taken down really, really easily and gave up his back really, really, really easily. It was something I was worried about because like Lontrop just had not fought anybody particularly good. It was the classic Contender Series thing where like you have a flashy record and I think you're athletic and I think you've got a little something and I'm going to pick you. But at the same time there is a level that you have not been tested at and not great. He wants to fight Gabriel Benitez. That was pretty cool. I'm fine with like, Padilla, by the way, I'm saying. I'm fine with that. And I don't really know what to do. I mean, Lontrop will stick around, obviously. Like he had a little bit of dating White Contender Series bump here. I obviously I'm not done with him. He's 24 years old. He has time. He has like a decade left in his career. But it's one of those like I do need to see how he responds to this. Ivana Petrovic versus Na Liang. I think the only thing I learned here is that Petrovic apparently has a kickboxing background, which I do not understand. Her defense is incredibly poor. But first round was won by Liang, and then she had no gas after that. She got manhandled in the second round and then eventually subbed in the third round. Liang is not UFC caliber, but at least she tests you for a round. She is a gold mine compared to Marnik Man. But cut her, please. And Petrovic, I got against Teresa Bleda. They're two massive women for their weight class, and that is kind of their main attribute. So put them against each other, and let's see which one of them you want to kind of push up the division, I guess, and which one is just going to be kind of down here as a size test. Mahashate versus Gabriel Benitez was all kinds of fun. I scored it for Benitez. I have no problem with Mahashate winning. There was very, very, very little between them. It was kind of like the Hubbard versus Figlak fight, where it really comes down to a personal preference or impact of what was clean, what hurt people. I think what gets Mahashate probably the win is dude no sells everything. Like he took some hard, clean looking leftover hands particularly, from Benitez, it just did not flinch. And obviously, there's a power imbalance there that came really, really convincing to me in the second round. In the second round, Benitez hit a body kick and just thudded into Mahashate. And then Mahashate fires right back, basically the same body kick, other side of the body, boom! And it's like, wow, there is when you put them side by side like that, there really is a big power that Mahashate has. So I picked Benitez. I'm sad he lost. I thought he won, but at the same time, this is a win for the guy who's 24 years old. There's something to build there. And as long as Mahashate realizes this was an incredibly close fight, there should be some things to learn because he's got a lot of good ideas. The beginning of the second round is a great example of this. His corner is like, we want to try to knee him. We want to try to hit him with the knee because he dips his head a little bit. All right. And he does that and is very, very naked. But like, it's the right idea, poor execution. And between that and his lack of head movement, if he could just fix those two things, like refine the application of his ideas a little bit and get a little bit more head movement in, he could be really, really scary because he's a 6 foot tall lightweight with power. That's terrifying. That is potentially terrifying if everything goes according to plan. So that was the card. For next opponents, I have Nurul Aliyev for Mahashate. I think, unfortunately, with the Contender Series phase with Benitez, where like he just kind of needs wins and hasn't beaten anyone not named Charlie Ontiveros in some time. So there you go. What we got coming up next week is one which I won't be covering. There's just not a lot of MMA on it. Like that's the classic problem here. There's a lot of like fun Muay Thai and kickboxing. Simile Sundell's on the card, which is always fun. I really enjoy her fights, and there's some other like very, very impressive stuff. But yeah, there's There's, I think, only like 3 MMA fights on the card, and I know 2 of the fighters in them. Four. 4 fights on the card. I know 2 of the fighters on there. I know Halil Amir, who I do think is quite good. And then I know Reese McLaren, who is not very good. Reese McLaren is fine, but like he's not gonna break any. Like he's been a one fighting championship like regular. He's been the test guy basically, and he's facing a guy named Yong who I don't immediately recognize. 5'6" bantamweight, looks quite ripped. Has fought and won a couple of times. Has a pretty good record actually, but I don't really know him all that well. And he lost to Wakamatsu, who is not very good. Anyways, there you go. I'm not really going to be covering that one. And then UFC 301, of course, takes center stage. Not a good pay-per-view. For a pay-per-view, this is bad. Pantoja versus Usyk is a main event. Going to enjoy the fight. Don't get me wrong. But it's not good. Jose Aldo coming back. That's sad. Vitor Petrino versus Anthony Smith. That's not good. Pereira versus Poteria. That'll be a fun fight at least. Paul Craig versus Kyle Bahayo. That could be fun. It could also be very, very dull. Brito versus Shore. Lucindo versus Kovacevic. Brenner versus Oralby. Gomes versus John Silva. Joaquin Silva versus Jakar Close. Jamie Malarkey. Mauricio Ruffy. I don't know you. You're a Contender Series guy. Okay. So I'll have to look into him. A couple of knockouts. And then further on down, you have Dion Barbosa versus... I am not going to be able to say this girl's name. I Lithuanian names, and I do not mix. Ernesta Karakat. Ishmael Bonfim versus Vince Pichel. Alessandro Costa versus Kevin Borges. Apparently, it was supposed to be Pereira versus Mahmoud Muradov. That would have been fun. It's not a great pay-per-view, and I know UFC 300 people are going to give it a lot of slack. We can have these cards if we get UFC 300 every so often. Problem is you're going to get UFC 300 like every 2 years, so that doesn't really justify much. Anyways, that is the fight. That is what's coming up, and I will see you. Well, you will hear me when I break them down. Also, check out the links down below for gaming stuff, the MMA simulator, and my social medias. There you go.